this situation, Mr. Moody acknowledged that he was driving the Ford Explorer back in April 25th of 2009, that Ms. Voss was in the vehicle with him, and they'd come there to party like they usually did from time to time, leaving Georgetown to come to Myrtle Beach. That they saw Ms. Drexel walking down the street by themselves. He saw her and approached her and asked if she wanted a party, in other words, use marijuana with them. According to Mr. Moody's version of the events, Ms. Drexel voluntarily got in the vehicle at that time for the purposes of partying. And we don't have any evidence to contradict that or not. Ms. Drexel can't tell us how she got in that vehicle at that point in time. Mr. Moody says she did not form any intent to hurt her or do anything in that period of time in Oregon County. That we were able to corroborate that Mr. Moody had a campsite in the Pole Yard landing area that he would go down there and camp and fish from time to time, spend the night down there, and that was their destination as they drove southbound with Ms. Voss in the vehicle with Ms. Drexel for the purpose of smoking marijuana. Mr. Moody did say that he had hoped that during the course of the use of marijuana that maybe some voluntary sexual activity may occur, but at that time claimed it was consensual, hoping the marijuana would play a role in that decision-making process. Once they arrived there was no contention in the Pole Yard, that area. His campsite is not where the dot is. It's actually a little bit more into the woods. There's not a dot on that spot, but it's in the wooded section further down. At some point in time, Ms. Voss had to go tend to an errand concerning keys to a family member, and she left during that period of time. When she left, everything was fine between the two of them. They were partying, socializing according to the sworn post-Miranda statements. We were able to corroborate some details of that story based on phone calls between Ms. Voss and Mr. Moody, and specifically phone calls occurred between the two of them that time, indicating that they were not together at that period of time, but the phone calls, common sense dictates if you're calling someone, you're not usually standing beside them. Nonetheless, Mr. Moody indicates that after that consensual interaction was taking place, he decided that it was time to advance the situation, wanted sexual conduct, wanted to have sex with her. She resisted at that point in time. At that point in time, he seized her, and the kidnapping in Georgetown County began occurring at that point in time. Mr. Moody recalls that he compelled her to remove all of her clothing and then sexually assaulted her through force or threats of violence at that point in time. Once the act was completed, he realized that he was most likely going back to prison for his conduct and manually strangled her at the campsite at that point. He relays to us that at that point in time, when she was deceased, he put her in a blanket and then moved her some bushes outside the area. Ms. Voss returned. Upon returning from her errand, which when she returned, she immediately asked where Ms. Drexel was, and his issue was that her friends had come picked her up. Through Ms. Voss's cooperation, she continues to maintain her high skepticism that that was a true story, but did not see anything specific herself, but highly skeptical about that being the correct version of the events. They left the scene, and Mr. Moody indicates during the middle of the night he took a different vehicle. When Ms. Voss was asleep, came back, got Ms. Drexel, her mortal remains, and then took her up to a location on Pennyroyal Road, which is near the Georgetown County Airport, into a wooded area, and then buried her. After that interview with law enforcement was completed, he agreed to take investigators both to the pole yard and point out the campsite locations, and he agreed to go to the area on Pennyroyal Road and pointing to investigators the location where he placed Ms. Drexel's mortal remains. That occurred roughly on May of 2008. Based on his initial statements, Mr. Moody was charged with obstruction of justice to take him into custody until we could determine and corroborate some of the details of his statement. Obviously, the statements were shocking, but they've heard plenty of stories before. So we wanted to see what we could find out there. He was being detained on an obstruction of justice charge, which he admitted to doing. And then roughly May 11th to May 12th of 2012, investigators for the Sheriff's Department and the FBI found the mortal remains of Ms. Drexel off that road. Of interest, of important point for corroboration, there are several items that were recovered from the location of the mortal remains, and no clothing or remnants of clothing were recovered to corroborate Mr. Moody's version of what he had done to her. Her mortal remains were proven beyond a reasonable doubt to be hers through dental records as well as DNA tests.